Well, g'day curd nerds, or should I say meatheads, or can't think of a name. You'll have to think of one in the comments. So watch today how I make a whey fermented drink that is called Blaand, B-L-A-A-N-D, Blaand. So hopefully it's anything but bland, of course. This was a very simple drink to make. It's fermenting now. It's been fermenting for a day. So I'm going to split this video into two and show you a taste test a little bit later on, probably a couple of months down the track. I don't know how long it's going to ferment for. We will see. But it is bubbling nicely there. Very simple to make. You just need some whey from some cheese, which is a Colby that I made earlier, and I used all the whey from that. You'll need some honey and you'll need some mead yeast. Anyway, let me show you how I made Blaand. So the ingredients for Blaand is 1.5 kilograms or 3.3 pounds of honey, approximately 4 litres or 4.2 quarts of whey, and that should be used within about 4 hours of making the cheese. 3/4 of a teaspoon of mead yeast. Now make sure when you filter the whey you use some cheesecloth to get rid of the chunky cheesy bits. You don't want those in your Blaand. Now to clean everything up, I'm using a low sudsing detergent, and I'm washing all of my equipment, including the airlock, the bung and the demijohn. Give that a good scrub with a brush, using a bottle brush there to get rid of any dirt that may be inside the demijohn. Then I get rid of that water, and I'm going to use a no rinse sanitizer or sterilizer. This is sodium percarbonate, so you don't need to rinse off any of the equipment after you have sterilized it. Just leave that in there for a few minutes, and then pull it all out again and put it on a clean tea towel. Make sure I filled up the demijohn with about 1 litre of water, put a bung in it, and gave it a good shake to make sure that it was thoroughly sanitized. Now to make the honey flow a bit easier, I've just let it rest in some warm tap water, just to make it a little bit more fluid. I'm using 2 lovely honeys from Ballarat. One was given to me by one of my customers who's a backyard beekeeper, and he gave me some honey. Now I'm using a yeast by Mangrove Jacks. This is a mead yeast, MO05, and I've got all my sanitized equipment there on a clean tea towel, waiting to be used. So first of all, we're going to measure out the 1.5 kilos or 3.3 pounds of honey. Now I made a mistake here, as I do, and I tried to pour the honey through a funnel. It wasn't quite runny enough, and it took a long time. So I'll spare you the pain and show you how I fixed it. So I did have to let that drain through the funnel. There's no other way around it. Then I just simply poured it straight from the jar. It fit through the hole in the demijohn, no problems at all. I did that with the second container, the 1 kilo container, and got most of it in there. I quickly sanitized a spoon because I had some leftover sanitizer fluid, and then poured the rest of the 1 kilo, the big tub, into the small one, and then just pour it through the neck of the demijohn. Got most of it out, which was good. Quickly sanitised a 2-litre jug. I just set that aside and set the demijohn aside. I'm going to measure the temperature of the whey first. It should be between 15 and 28 Celsius or 59 and 82 Fahrenheit. This is the fermenting range of the yeast that I'm using. Now it may differ for you. Now pour half the whey, or 2 litres, into the demijohn. I'm just using that jug to transfer it in. Makes it a little bit easier than having to hover the big pot over the top of the demijohn. Now I was thinking maybe I used the spout, but I chose the funnel. It was a lot easier. So just pour that in. Now we're going to put a bung in, and we're going to shake the demijohn to dissolve the honey. Now this took a good 15 minutes to dissolve all this honey. Still not dissolved. So once I thought most of it was dissolved, I put another 1.5 litres of whey into the jug. And I managed to scrape out the rest of the honey out of the containers, pop a bit of warm whey in there, and dissolve any remaining honey. Just pop the lid on, give it a good shake, and then pour it into your demijohn. And then we'll add that and the rest of the whey into the demijohn as well. So I'm going to put the bung back in again and shake the demijohn to dissolve all the remaining honey. This does take a long time. So once you think all the honey's dissolved, we can move on to the next step. So I just washed off the outside of the demijohn there to make sure no ants decided it was a good place to call home. Now I add the final 500 millilitres of whey to the demijohn. Just pop the bung back in quickly, give it a quick shake. And now I'm going to measure the specific gravity of the must. It's now called a must. Just so I know how much alcohol is in the brew when it's finished. So I'm using a 100 milliliter flask there. Pop in my hydrometer and let it float. And it floats fairly high. So the reading I took was 1.112 was the specific gravity of the must to start with. Okay, now you can pour that back in because we did sanitize the little flask there and the hydrometer, so don't want to waste that. Now there's the yeast. It's called M05 or M05 and it's suitable for all types of mead. So I thought this was a fairly safe candidate. We're not going to use all of it because the sachet is used for 23 litres. Now I've only got about 4.2 litres of fluid there, 4.5 litres of fluid. So I put the yeast into a sanitised jar, a sterilised jar, so I could keep that in the fridge when I'm not using it. So we're going to add the yeast to the must when it's below 28 Celsius or 82 Fahrenheit. And then we can do what's called pitching the yeast. Now some people rehydrate their yeast. I've never done that in all the years of brewing I've done. So I'm putting 3/4 of a teaspoon of the yeast through the neck of the demijohn. So we're going to pop the bung back in and just give that a bit of a swirl to mix up the yeast. Now pop the bung back in and give it a bit of a swirl. Now I've already oxygenated the must with all that shaking, so there's no need to add any more oxygen in by giving it a good shake. A little bit of a swirl there just to mix the yeast in. Now we're going to pop in the airlock, but before I do that, I'm going to add a little bit of fluid. Now you can use water just out of the tap, that's fine, I've done that before. And this time I'm using a little bit of sanitizer. Don't fill it up entirely, so it's about half and half. There's some lines on the airlock. So fit that to the bung and then press the bung in as tightly as you possibly can. This prevents any further oxygenation or any beasties getting into your must. So we're going to ferment that at room temperature until it stops fermenting. Now this could take as little as a week, sometimes up to 2 months. You can see there the level of the sanitizer in the airlock. So after about 24 hours, it's going to start to ferment. As you can see, it's very slow at first. And then it looks like there's a layer of cream on top, but that's the yeast starting to work. So day 2. It was slightly faster, as you can see there. And there was a fair bit of yeast activity. Now this is sped up to 1,000 times, just so you can see the CO2 being created by the yeast as it consumes the sugars in the honey. So at day 4 it's about 1 bubble a second, and it's still continue that on. It's about day 6 now and it's about the same. As you can see, lots of activity on the top still, sped up 1,000 times. Alrighty, back to Gav. So there you have it. That was a fairly simple process. I mucked up a bit when I put the honey into the bottle, but that's just me trying to find the most awkward way to do something. But yeah, I've got it sitting here in the kitchen out of direct sunlight. So there's about 4.5 litres of liquid in there. It's fermenting well, and you saw that in the video. But yeah, absolutely so simple to make. Don't throw your whey away. Make Blaand. But however, I've never tasted it, so it could taste, well, hopefully it doesn't taste vile, and hopefully it doesn't taste bland. So a little bit of flavour I'm hoping to be in there. So I don't expect the lactose to ferment, because it's a non-fermentable sugar as far as yeast goes. It has to be broken down with something called lactase, which you find in lactose-free milk, that sort of stuff. The lactose should remain behind, so it should be fairly sweet once all the honey has fermented out. I'm hoping for an alcohol content of about 13%, about the same as a white wine. But we'll see how that pans out as it matures. Anyway, I'll show another video as soon as something else happens to it as it develops through its life cycle. Anyway, thanks for watching, curd nerds, or mead makers. There you go, mead makers. I've just thought of it. If you want to support the channel financially, pop down. The links are in the description for YouTube memberships and Patreon. Probably the closest kit that I've got in my range is probably the ginger beer kit. Certainly got the demijohn, the bung, and the airlock to make this Blaand. Anyway, thanks for watching, mead makers, and we will see you in the next video. Bye.